And hello again, dear ones. Rev Briz here,
BRZ here.
and we're a couple of ministers on New Thought Today. Now, this is a brand new program, and we're so grateful to be with you. We want to say thank you, number one, for tuning in. Whether well, I can tell no, you're not here live, because right now there's no. Oh, hey, now there's a couple people here live. Right on.
Yes.
Welcome to. Thank you for being with us. And for everybody else that's watching this at another time, thank you for joining us as well. This is a deep dive program where Rev Z and I we're going to take a look at New Thought Today. Is it relevant? What's happening? Where are we as a movement, as a philosophy, and all that. So before we get started, we also do want to say a quick thank you to the New Thought Media Network for making this possible and making sure that this show, as well as all of our programming, is available to you. We've got over 15 hours of live broadcast programming every week here on the New Thought Media Network, so it's great to be with you. All right, well, Z, good afternoon. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, trying to apply these new thoughts to a new world. That's what this stuff is about. So that's why we're talking about new thought today. How do we apply these principles and laws and perspectives on life to current actions and spread it across the land?
Yeah, and it definitely is a new world. There's no question about that, right, folks? We're witnessing human evolution in real time. We're witnessing almost immediate demonstration of the power of the collective consciousness in real time on our news feeds, on our channels, on all the places. So we've got about an hour together today, and one of the things we wanted to do was give you a little recap of how we got here and pick up where we left off from last week. So Z and I are a couple of ordained religious science ministers. We've been around this movement. I've been in this thing, man, just short of 20 years now. How about you, Z?
Yeah, I think my first experience was in 2001.
Right on.
2001.
All right, about the same as myself. August of '01 is when I first bumped into the science of
Yeah.
mind. However, I
Mine
believed a lot of
I
this
was going to just
before
say mine was October.
October. Okay, uh, and uh, and so we bookend. Yeah, I was in front of 9/11, and you're just after 9/11. I
Yes.
remember a lot of people calling me just after 9/11 saying, "What did you just find? You just found something." So
Yes.
anyway, I always digress. You'll get used to that on this program. But what we want to do is we want to take a religious science perspective of the integral philosophy and spiral dynamics and how the study of human consciousness is evolving, and maybe determine how we doing when it comes to living and expressing new thought philosophy and the principles. And we want to start that, and we did start that last week, by taking a look at what is known as the Centers for Spiritual Living global vision for the Centers for Spiritual Living. Now, like any good organization, right? Z and I are card carrying members. We pay our dues. We serve this organization called Centers for Spiritual Living, and they have their mission, vision, and purpose statements. And we want to make sure we take a look at those here today. For Centers for Spiritual Living, their mission is to provide spiritual tools for personal and global transformation. Our purpose is to awaken humanity to its spiritual magnificence, and our vision is a world that works for everyone. Now, those would sound like some lofty goals and a lofty vision, a world that works for everyone. Uh, and we've been operating underneath these statements for the last time I think these were updated was about a decade or so ago now. Z,
Yeah.
how does it feel for you to be working towards this vision and mission and purpose and goal that CSL has set out before us?
Well, I think it's absolutely perfect, given my life experience. Just because, there's that saying, all things work together for good, and that we live in a symbiotic world where everything is connected at some level and depends on everything else. And so this idea of having tools and a perspective and a way of life that recognizes that, enhances that, and makes a statement that you can't do this alone, boom, it just clicks. And so for me, it's like, if I look back over my life, there's nothing, if I really want to be honest, there's nothing I've ever done that I did totally by myself,
Yeah.
except make a decision. Other than that,
Or get in my own way.
yes.
I can do that pretty well all on my own, folks. I don't need any help getting in my way, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So, uh, and along with this mighty mission, vision, purpose, there is a piece of I like to call it a historical document that was created many, many, many years ago now, underneath the auspice of the United Centers for Spiritual Living. You don't know the history of all the letters, don't worry about it. They created a thing called the Global Heart Vision. And in the reformation of CSL in 2012, what came forward was a little bit of a different wording of many of those principles. And we now refer to that as the global vision for Centers for Spiritual Living. And it's 10 statements. It's 10 statements that are very powerful. They fit together. We're not going to read all 10 of them here today because the intent behind this program is to take a deeper look at each of these statements in turn
Hmm.
and really dig in and ask ourselves, is this relevant? Is this operative? Is it working? How can I activate this in my life? And how can I use these principles to move us forward in life? So,
And
real quick, we just want everybody to know this is, if you want it to be interactive, we're interactive. So feel free to chat in the comment box. Leave us a comment there. If we're live and we can address that in the moment, we will. If not, we'll chat with you in the after moment. But
yeah.
see what we're gonna say.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was just going to say, the interesting, I think, and exciting part about this whole thing is the ability to take some principles, extract some laws, and apply them in your life to see if they work. One of the hallmark in my mind, anyway, statements from Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, and is that he says, "Don't take my word for this stuff. Take it and practice it in the laboratory of your own life. This is a science that's based on principles and laws. So if you apply it to your life to see if they work, then you can be your own best critic or audience to applaud. And that you will find out as we begin to move down this path, a lot of the subjects of emotional intelligence and coaching and supporting people to be better than who they think they are,
Yeah.
a lot of those ideas and principles and learnings, if you will, are in religious science, science of mind. And so we want to talk about that, uplift it, and show you how to compare and contrast and how to implement it in the laboratory of your life.
Exactly. And I that was one of the things that always caught me, that really caught me about this was I heard ministers from the very beginning saying, "Don't believe me. Don't just sit here and say, 'Oh yeah, that's okay because he said it.' Go out there and use this stuff. Make this stuff active in your life
Mhm.
and really create the life that you want,
Right.
not the life you have allowed default and limiting beliefs to create that you've created for yourself."
Yeah, yeah. And which, and one of the things that attracted me was this whole idea of religious science, because it captured two things that I was thoroughly enthralled with, and it allowed me to activate both sides of my brain, if you will, and look to marry them and say, okay, this is how we do it. And so I know in a science lab, if any of you have taken biology or chemistry or physics, there's that thing called the lab notebook, right? Where you write down the evidence of your experience or your contradictions or your contrast, and you use that to accentuate the principle establish the law or come up with further things to accentuate that. And so that for me was just great. And so that's what one of the things that we want to do here with this program is get you into that mode to really exercising the idea of what the universal principles are, what are the laws that extract from that, and how we activate them in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, 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 yes. Oh, I'm excited. And excuse me. Now, and what I know, Z, is we were talking before the show, right? You've pulled out a couple of great quotes, a couple of great pieces to help us understand the difference between principles and laws. Now, and
Yes.
you'll hear this a lot, folks, right? So before we dig into these 10 guiding, we're going to call them principles for now. You might call them a little something later. But share with us a little bit. You prepared a little something to help us understand the difference between principles and laws, right?
Right, right. And so in the synopsis, principles are a little broader, and there are more guiding ideas and guiding principles about a thing. Uh, and an example of that I like to always use is electricity. There is a principle of electricity. However, when we get down to proving or examining or looking at those principles, we have to move to laws that that substantiates the idea of what electricity is. And so when we look at electricity, we can get hydroelectricity, we can get thermoelectricity, we can get turbo electricity, we can get nuclear electricity, and then there's old fossil fuel electricity, right? And so we have these different laws that must be met in those different arenas that will substantiate the principle of electricity. But the laws to do it, if I'm using wind for turbo, is one way. If I'm using it for hydro or water, is another way. The equation works out to be the same at the results, on the other side of the equal sign. But all that stuff on the other side of the left hand side of the equal sign is quite different. And so that's how we begin to establish those things. And those laws are written down, they're provable. I can do them time and time again. You can do them time and time again, and the results will be the same. That's when that law part comes in. And so for me, that helped me look at this whole difference between principles and laws. And sometimes they get, pretty fuzzy. But at the end of the day, when you really need to figure out what's what, who's who, and how you need to travel, having these basic understandings of a principle and a law is, you know, what you need to have in your hip pocket to pull out and say, okay, this is the principle, okay, this is the law, so we don't get off on the wrong track.
Exactly. Uh, and one of the ways that many of us have used to shorten that down even more, right? With electricity, you can use electricity to cook a man a dinner or to cook the man, depending on how you use it. So
Yes.
let's take a look at these quotes real quick that you pulled up. Principles are all around principles. In physics, are more like guiding ideas than anything. According to F. Woodridge Constant, former chairman of the physics department at Trinity College and author of both Fundamental Principles of Physics and Fundamental Laws of Physics, a principle tells physicists how the world works in general. Principles tend not to be specific rules that you can write down in mathematical terms. Instead, they are more like guiding theories that allow scientists to make predictions about new phenomena and develop new laws that clearly explain the phenomena. So the
Yes.
principle is not the law, but the principle can become the law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the law. Laws are on paper, in contrast to the sometimes wishy-washy wording of principles. Laws are perfectly clear. This is because physicists define laws with mathematical statements. You cannot subjectively interpret mathematical statements, which makes them more reliable than principles in clearly defining the rules of nature in a way that all physicists can agree on. You guys are all with us here, right?
Yeah.
Now, one key difference between a law and a principle is that law have no exceptions. Physicists prove a law via the mathematics of physics, and proofs make no room for exceptions. So again, electricity is going to work every time the same way, no matter how you produce the electricity or
Right.
what the causative nature is that brings electricity
Right.
into experience.
Right. And furthermore, whether you do it in the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, one state versus another state, one country versus another country, male versus female, child versus senior, won't matter. You hit the switch, lights coming on unless you got a bad bulb or you didn't pay the bill. Now, if you didn't pay the bill, I can't help you. But it's gonna work, and that is the beauty of religious science because it gives us a framework. And some of you might be saying, well, why are they talking about physics and so forth? Because it sets the framework for which we begin to there's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence now, and because mathematics has been around and substantiated for a long time, but now we're beginning to see that we have to match the emotional side with the logical analytical side to get a whole picture of what's happening. And that's what religious science, way back when Ernest Holmes decided to coin that and propagate this idea and theories and ideals, is that we have to be balanced. We have to have the analytical and logical and as well as the spiritual side. So religious science allows us to do that very well.
Yes. Yes. In the opening pages of the Science of Mind textbook, we look forward to the day when science and spirituality walk hand in hand.
Yes.
I believe we have, in many ways, reached that point. Now, there's still some that wouldn't say so, and others that would, but I believe we've reached that point, and now we get to move forward. Now we get to move into a newer exploration.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's bring up our first point here in the global vision for everybody, Z, and we'll get this rolling a little bit. And we're gonna have to take a break here in a moment or two. But this is like in many ways this is where it all starts, and
Foundation.
the absolute foundation. We envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. Now, I'm going to hand this over back to Z in a second here, but before I do, I just want to say I always invite you to look at that word envision as active. It's not something we're putting out in the future. Hey, it's not like tomorrow I'm going to envision that. I'll get to it, I promise. No, we are always talking about in this exact moment, in this exact experience. So anytime I see one of these I envision statements or we envision statements, I use it to activate the creative principle and the creative process within myself and mentally and physically envision it. It's an active, in the moment verb. I'm envisioning this truth. And today, what we're all talking about is envisioning all people, all beings, and all life as an expression of God, as
Yes.
expressions of God.
Yes. And that's key because when you look at envisioning is in the moment. Visioning is casting a future, but envisioning is like I'm taking that vision and setting it right now. And so I'm sure, given where we are in time and history, everybody is envisioning something different than what we are experiencing now. And I know we have a vision of where we want it to go, but right now I have to deal with the vision, the actuality of what it is, and I need to be able to envision that in the moment
Right.
so that I can navigate. And so this whole idea of all people, all beings, and all life as an expression of God, as an expression of the divine, as an expression of spirit, can sometimes be a bit uh I'll just be blunt, it's a bit confusing, right?
Yeah.
because what we're navigating, and that's why we started the program with this whole idea of getting a footing between principles and laws, because you got to wrestle with this thing between the principles and the law when you see the actual moment that
Yeah.
things are happening.
Right. It's it's often very easy to say, yeah, we're all one. Everybody's part of this thing. We're all one, except for that guy over in that house over there, or that guy with that haircut, or that
Yes.
guy with that relationship orientation, or these the way we're all good except the Christians. They're not very Christian,
Right.
right? It's real easy to slip away from this foundational bedrock. And
Mm-hmm.
personally, I believe this is part of what we're seeing in America right now is we have a tough time. We got to get this one right. We got to get this one in place or we can't go forward. None of the rest of what we're going to share with you today and in the coming weeks is coming into fruition unless we get to this piece first.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
We're all, every single one of us, those I don't like, those I'm in love with, those I don't understand, those that I don't even know exist,
Mm-hmm.
all part of this one thing.
Yeah. And I just wanted to bring this point up about envisioning, because I think one of the key components of envision is that it is a verb.
Yeah.
It is an action word. It is something that you have to participate in, um, without you can't passively deal with envisioning. You got to be active in it.
Right.
And so sometimes when we look at this whole thing of envisioning that basically everything in the entire universe is an expression of God, expression of the divine, we sometimes look at that and we can't quite see it. When we have, we just had the hurricane Delta down in the Gulf that is, 6 weeks or so right after another one that pummeled that. And so now it's like devastation in the Gulf Coast and Louisiana region down there. And someone will definitely ask the question, how is that? Uh, how does that happen? If you're telling me everything is an expression of God, how is God expressing that? That's killing lives and destroying land and property and so forth. And so, again, I just lead you back, and we're going to get into it as we go through this week and next week's and the following weeks of how this works. But again, without just harping on this idea of principles and law, will help us navigate
Yeah.
through this labyrinth, if you will, or this maze of events and understanding.
Yeah. I love the way you say that. The labyrinth of understanding of events and understanding. And we're constantly doubling back on how do I understand this from a different perspective? How does this event inform what I believe?
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to work towards and how I'm going to express this. So, before we go much further down this rabbit hole, though, Z, we do want to make sure we take a quick break and let everybody know that if you're just joining us, you're on the New Thought Media Network. My name's Rev Briz. I'm here with my co-host Rev Z, and we are New Thought today. We're taking a deeper look at the New Thought principles, practices, and laws to determine how they fit in our lives at this time. Are they valuable? Are they still valid? Do they work in your life? And we'd
Right.
love to hear from you. So
Yeah.
please feel free to share your comments in the comment section of this video. And if we're still live when we get it, we'll address it and share a little bit more with you. So, and today we're really focusing in on this very first principle in the Centers for Spiritual Living Global Vision. We envision all people, all beings, and all life as expressions of God. So, Z, I'm going to throw it right back at you. Right? We know that that there are expressions of God in pretty much everything out there.
Yes.
And sometimes it's tough to see. So when you yourself are faced with one of those situations, perhaps it's the hurricanes in the Gulf Coast, perhaps it's the current political situation, perhaps it's just the guy that, was in front of you on the highway this morning, or what last
Hmm.
time you might have been out of the house.
Yes.
When you're faced with those situations that don't seem like God, don't feel like the oneness, don't, how is this character a divine
Yeah.
expression of God? What do
Yeah.
you do with that?
Well, I just had this conversation with somebody the other day, so it's really great that you bring this up. That it spawned this idea. There's an author out, philosopher that some of you may have heard of, Alan Watts. And Alan Watts was a one of the original Buddhists back in the day. He lived on a tugboat out in Sausalito. He was a very eclectic kind of character, but very profound. He was a professor, and he said something that has stuck with me now for almost 20 years. He says that we have to look at life in oscillation. We have to look at life in oscillation because life is happening or God is expressing at every level of existence. That's why this statement, all people, all beings, everything is an expression. And so he had this statement that said, if I take a postage stamp and I put it on the table and I look at it in normal vision, I see a postage stamp with the picture of whoever's on it or whatever is on it, the domination, so forth and so on. If I take that stamp and put it under a microscope and look at it from that perspective, it changes everything
Mm.
instantly. If I stand on top of my house and look at the postage stamp on the sidewalk again, it changes the perspective of it instantly. And so his point was that if we're going to understand and operate and navigate life as it really is, and understand that God is an expression in all of it, I have to oscillate between the 10,000-foot vision, the normal vision, and the microscopic vision.
Yeah.
And I can't get stuck at any one because I will lose perspective.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening. We get stuck either at the 10,000, the normal, or the micro, and we get stuck there. And we think that that is the whole world. But there are obviously more, but there's at least in this perspective, there's two other versions of views that we have to engage life at. And so that for me is a grounding principle.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the way you share that. It's for myself, I'm often reminded that, or I often have to remind myself that this person in front of me, this experience, this situation, they are someone's divine child. Some husband, some wife, some father, mother, however,
Mhm.
whatever the names or labels they used at the time. Two people came together, be a wife,
Mhm.
two wives right now, two women, right? Of course. So two people came together and chose to bring forth life. And they brought forth that life, and that life was absolutely precious, absolutely special. And that life was absolutely perfect in that moment. Now, from that point, we all get conditioned and we all start to take on biases. So, at the 10,000-foot view, we're all perfect expressions of God. At the 500-foot view, well, there's some Europeans and there's Africans and there's Americans, both North and South. And then we get down into that real life view, and there's you and me.
Mhm.
And at every stage in all of it, we retain free will, we
Yeah.
retain choice, the ability to utilize these principles, the power, the presence, the intelligence of spirit in the creation of our lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's where it gets a little tricky, though, isn't it? See?
Yeah, well, because you in saying that you just reminded me of a news story I saw this morning. I don't know, it's pretty recent because it definitely happened during the pandemic. But there's a young man down in uh in the Atlanta, Georgia metro area. He's 12 years old, and he is in college right now studying astro engineering, or aeronautical engineering, or astronomy, or something to that effect. I forget exactly. He's one of the engineers that deal with space. He's 12 years old. The kid was sign languaging at 9. He was reading at 1. He was doing fractions at 2. Um, and you and you know, and the guy had the interview with him, and he asked him this. He said this question that was profound to me. He said, people call you odd or a little whatever, and little this, little that. And he said, well, I've been this all my life, and it's not that I'm so-called smarter than anybody else. You see, I look at things differently than other people. And because of that, I'm a fast learner. I don't filter myself, and I'm doing a little ad-libbing to get the point that he expressed. But he was saying, I am an expression of God, and he made the statement about, I remember going to first grade at 2.
Yeah.
And everybody was so much taller than me. And he said, I felt so out of place. But I was able to navigate that and put it in vision where I was, put it in perspective, and come up with my way of life. And to say I'm no better or smarter than anybody else, I just look at the problem. I look at the situation. I look at the solution a little bit differently.
Yeah. It's so incredibly important. Right? We talk about these things, folks. We know that each successive generation comes in with a cultural understanding that was perhaps discovered or activated in the generation before them.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are coming in quick, learning quicker, learning smarter. I had a recent talk with my 15-year-old, and in the midst of it, he says, I get it, Dad, you're just not there yet. I got 35 years on you. What do you mean I'm not there yet? But that's the truth.
Yeah.
The kids today and see life differently than we do. We saw life differently than our folks.
Yeah.
And that to me is part of this oneness, this recognition that we're all a unique expression, because I view God, the one, as this evolving, expanding experience.
Yeah.
Ever creating itself, always recreating itself into new and exciting, newer forms.
Yeah. Yep. And I that these young folk are definitely, and some old folk, I don't want to count us out, but
Right.
but each and every one of us has a different and unique way of expressing God. And I love the idea where you speak to the fact that God is evolving. And that says that our knowledge of God is evolving. God is, right?
Right.
God says, there's one version that says, I am that I am, meaning that I'm it, right? I am all that you ever thought, period. But I'm evolving to mankind, to the universe, if you will, because you're still trying to extract principles and define laws to understand what the heck I can do, right?
Yep.
And so you sometimes become truly amazed. And then I like to look at the biblical point of Moses, right? Moses and the law, right?
Right.
So Moses is observing life, whether you believe the story is a metaphor or it really happened, that's a personal preference. But when you look at the story and the lessons to be learned, he had all these different ideas and concepts and principles going around in his head. He goes in the desert, in the wilderness, into the silence of himself to try and understand his expression of the divine. And like most of us, he had this thing, man, I don't know nothing about this thing. This thing look a little shady, a little shafty. And he said, God, I want to see you. I want to see you. And as the story goes, God says, nah, you can't see me because I'm too vast. I'm too wide. Not that I don't want to show you, but you have not evolved enough, or mankind has not evolved enough. So I'm gonna show you a burning bush to exhibit just a small inkling of what I can do. Because if you were to look at me fully, you would be the burning bush. You would bust into flame. And so that's what this principle, I believe, is trying to say, to envision that all things are expression of the divine. And as we begin to understand and practice and put in place these principles and laws, we begin to see more, and we begin to catch fire with the spirit, as they say, and are able to exhibit and express what the divine, what God, what spirit, pick a name that fits in your tradition, understanding, or comfort level, to say that there is a power greater than all of us that is uh, allowing this world to evolve, this universe to evolve, so that we can grab a hold of it and have a fun ride.
Yeah, and have a fun ride. Exactly. It, it's the immensity of all of it, folks. And the universe becomes the great synonym here, because if we think of the universe, we most people, well, we're either still expanding or we're starting to contract. We don't
Right.
really know, because we can't see that far out.
Right.
But we know, from a sense of faith, from a sense of theory, from a sense of introspection, that there's got to be that piece out there, right? There's so much more than we can know.
Mm-hmm.
And this principle calls us into that place of saying, wow, I've never considered that that's a piece of God too.
Mm-hmm.
I have never considered that that could be part of the oneness of this divine universal picture or vision or plan, or I like to use the term of a masterpiece quite a bit.
Yes.
We're God's great masterpiece, and in the mind of the one, it's already done. It's just we're starting to be able to see the brushstrokes a little differently as we move through our lives, as we come to understand and grow within these principles.
Yeah. 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 And I'm sure there's someone that's listening to this now, or that may listen to it later, and they may speak to the fact that, well, okay, I hear you. I hear you. But if all that's true, how about all of this uncomfortable stuff? How about all of this stuff that don't create joy, that don't create happiness? And you know, for me, I always and you may hear me say this a lot, that if I get stuck on the reading and all this other stuff that we've amassed to understand the divine, when I can't get clear, I look at nature, because I believe nature is operating on the original plan. If sometimes we as humans get in the way, but if we will allow it to do its thing, it will
Yeah.
follow the divine expression of God perfectly.
Yep.
And one thing I know, and I send my heart filled prayers to those in Colorado and those for sure in California who are dealing with forest fires.
Yeah.
But if you talk to agriculturalists, or you talk to forest rangers and things, they will tell you that after a fire happens in the forest, 8 times out of 10, that forest comes back stronger. Now we're losing some 1,000-year-old trees and people's property, and there's some of that stuff you can't replace. But if we just look at the collectiveness of the universe, of the one thing that works together, we know that there are sometimes some catastrophes or disasters that are heartfelt.
Yeah.
But as a result of that, we pray and mourn those who may have lost their lives or things. But we know because of that event, we are going to come back looking at that situation better. The plants, we know, they say come back better.
Yeah.
They come back stronger, more resistant. And so it seems kind of counterintuitive that some of these things happen and then we have to try to make sense of them. But there is space in the universe and the global perspective of oscillating up and down to put them in a better perspective, have our moments, our mourning, our sadness, whatever it is, but then use that as a catapult to
Yeah.
pop back into the game and say, all right, let's get busy.
Yeah, exactly. Long ago, I was introduced to the story that the fires in Yellowstone, there's a specific variety of pine tree that the pine cones will never fully open unless it's under extreme heat. And the seeds never find fertile ground unless there's extreme heat, and then they land on the parched and the scorched ground, and that transfers the seed far enough away from where it is that propagates the species.
Right.
In this new series in California, I saw a story of a beetle, a wood boring beetle that is adapted to feed on the trees that have been burned.
Mm.
So that beetle wouldn't exist
Hmm.
if it weren't for the renewing fire. And we
Yeah,
could find countless examples of how this works.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
But I want to agree with what Z is saying. When my life isn't working, that's where I've got to look. Wait a minute, where am I stepping outside of the natural
yeah,
the natural way, if you will?
yeah. And you know, in New Thought in general, we have these some of these laws that are, and especially in religious science, that are hallmarks of, you know, the law of cause and effect, the law of correspondence, the law of polarity,
Law of
the
attraction.
law of attraction. Uh, you know, and some folks say that we could narrow these laws down to seven, six or seven, and that all of the other laws are just a combination of these laws working together, right? So cause and effect, you know, we all learned this in science. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction. So as we begin to move and navigate through the world responds to us in kind, right? And to help encapsulate that law, if you don't quite see that one, then there's this whole law of correspondence, right? that
Right.
that there's a corresponding thing to everything, right? We know that, just looking at nature again, when we see hurricanes spun up, we know if the water is warm enough and we get a wind temperature that's spinning fast enough and they meet together, there's a corresponding action, cause and effect, that happens. If the speed is fast enough, if the water is warm enough, they can predict by laws and say this is going to be a category 2, 3, 4 hurricane.
Yep.
And so again, we understand these principles and laws enough that we can understand cause and effect. We can understand principles of correspondence or polarity, that things are going to move and sway. And once we understand these better and put them in the framework of how we get our heads around the idea that everything is an expression of God, then we start navigating different. We start building different. We start envisioning different. And that's why that word up front is, as Reverend Briz said, envision, this action word. Not only do I see it, I got to move towards it. I got to put these laws into effect. And
Yeah.
that's what religious science, and that's what this program is about. New Thought Today. How do we take these principles? How do we enact these laws so that we begin to build a world that'll work for everyone?
Yeah. So we've got 3 weeks till the election, folks, right? How do we do this? How do we make
Mm-hmm,
this work
mm-hmm,
so that it's working for us? Again, just as he said, so we're creating a world that works for everyone. And for me, the prescription is pretty simple. Is I move into the world, and whenever I feel triggered, I have to slow down and stop and recognize that that trigger is a place where I am denying this inherent oneness, this inherent connection. It is a place where I am denying, where I'm saying that doesn't look like God to me.
right.
Whatever you said, whatever you posted, whatever it is, if I get triggered, how dare they? Oh my God, did you hear what he said? No matter what that trigger is, that's my place to go to work.
Yes.
because that's the place where I still personally don't see this oneness, and I'm not experiencing it, I'm not expressing it. So I've got to stop everything I'm doing, go do my inner work,
Yep.
go on high, do the inner high work of coming back to that. You know, I may not like how this person is using the law. I may not like how they're using it, but I still have to honor that they are a divine, perfect expression of the one, whole, complete, and perfect, with nothing missing and nothing absent.
Right. Right. And that's the exact moment that we have to step into that oscillation.
Yeah.
We have to oscillate to begin to see it differently. If not, we'll spin out of control, so to speak.
Yep.
I'll
If I,
start looking at only the global vision and people on the ground. I got this grand vision of everybody, everything is working out for everyone, but ain't nothing happening on the ground to make sure people got health care, people got food, people are being nice to each other. And then you look there and say, oh my God, what happened? Well,
yeah.
we didn't take the divine view of things.
Exactly. And the minute I make you wrong about anything, folks, the minute I make someone else wrong about anything, all I'm really doing is making myself wrong. All I'm really doing is damaging my own ability. I'm misusing the law
Mhm.
to make somebody else wrong, rather than recognize that here too is God. And if not for this, I don't know, right? I don't know what the future holds because of this. And I'm reminded of the story of Mr. Nobel. We just went through the Nobel Peace Prize awards, and the whole reason there are the Peace Prize awards is because um, Nobel was a mistakenly believed dead, and he woke up one morning to find his own obituary in the newspaper. And he owned an explosives factory. He was an arms dealer. He built bombs for World War I. And he woke up in the morning and read his own obituary and was appalled at how he was described, because of the destructive nature of the products that he built his fortune upon. And that one incident changed the course of his life. He proceeded to create the Nobel Prizes, the Peace Prize to begin with, and then other prizes that went along with it. His legacy lives on, and we have changed the course of his
Yeah.
overall legacy because of a clerical error in a newspaper or copy room. But those synchronicities are happening every day. Those things are happening in your life and in my life. If we can just see the good in them, if we can
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
suspend our
Yeah.
own misperceptions and misconceptions, we can see truth.
And I love that because that song from Wicked, the song is the either the book or the song is still unwritten. I forget which one it is. Might be
Right.
both. But
Yeah.
but had we examined Nobel as an expression of divine and discounted it from his first point of view, we probably would never have gotten to the second point of view,
Yeah.
or the further extension of that expression of the divine. And so that correspondence, that balancing polarity thing that swings from one side to the other, popped in, and he found the balance. He
Yeah.
found his medium point of total expression of the divine, I would submit. And that's what we're each looking for. How to, as they say in the sports world, where is my sweet spot?
Mhm.
Where's my spot on the, we just had the championship, and congratulations to the winners, and I'm not picking a side, but each team, these players, they said, where is my spot? When I hit this spot, give me the ball. That's my sweet spot. I'm gonna score.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do in this expression of life. That's what we have to do to extanguate the whole idea that we are all expressions of the divine. And once we find the sweet spot, it's on.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm with you. So, where's your sweet spot, folks? Where is it easy for you to see the wholeness in everybody, to see the divine in everybody, to see the love in everybody? Where is it easy for you to be compassionate for those that maybe haven't seen the truth that you have yet, or are struggling
Yeah.
with recognizing or embodying these principles?
Yeah.
A lot of what we're talking about today, I was just as upset, angry, pissed off, and every other thing you can think of on 9/11, uh, as so many more in the world. And I was a brand new student to this. And I
Mhm.
remember the very shortly within a day or so of that incident being in a class, and the instructors and we were asking the instructor how to explain all that. And he told us he couldn't. He didn't know himself yet. But what he was sure of was that there had to be some collateral good in there somewhere. And that it might even take a decade or more to see the collateral good that comes from an event like that. But as long as we can hold true, as long as we can stay in belief that there is some good in there somewhere.
Mhm.
Some of you might remember the story of the pony. There's a pony in there somewhere. As long as you can remember that there is good in there somewhere, then you are guaranteed to see and experience that good at some point in your life.
And one of the key things that just popped in my mind when you were saying that is we got this law. We just talked about it a bit, and as we go through this series, we'll get more into that. Law, cause and effect law. Unfortunately, in today's high tech, data driven, technology driven world, we assume that cause and effect are closely related. They're not always closely related.
Right.
I could put a cause and effect today that you may not see the effect until 10 years, 20 years, 30 years later,
Yep.
which is again speaking to that point of you have to oscillate. You have to go between the different viewpoints of life, the different expressions of life, expressions of God, to get some understanding of what the possibilities are. We had Robert Schuller talking about possibility thinking. If you're going to go down that road of possibility thinking, you got to expand your vision. And
Yeah.
and Schuller was definitely on the New Thought wavelength when he had his Crystal Cathedral way back when.
Yeah.
These are some of the things we're going to get into talking about New Thought today and how these ideas and concepts have found their way in all manner of life. And that when you understand what new thought is, and especially from our perspective, religious science, you're going to say, I can do this.
Yep. The story, I love that you bring up Robert Schuller. The story of the Crystal Cathedral and how that actually got built, folks. We don't have time for it today. We're gonna hold that one. But I have some great stories of the 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 universal principles that were at play that made that building happen, and it will and ensured that it could never happen again.
Hmm.
That it is a unique one-time event and a one-time experience in the mind of God, because that's all that was necessary.
Wow.
That
I
one
look
time.
forward to that story myself.
Right, right on. So, hey, folks, this is New Thought Today. We're almost wrapping up here for today's episode, but we do want to say another quick shout out and thank you to the New Thought Media Network for making this possible, for viewers and listeners like you that are making all of this possible and making all of the programming on this network possible. We know there's a donation link in the show description, and there's a link to sign up for our newsletter. So if you'd like to stay on top of what we're doing, week by week, get one email a week. And if it's your day to support this network financially with your gifts, your tithes, your offerings, well, we want to make sure you know how much we appreciate that. And thank you for helping us to share this message across the planet, to raise up the vibration of humanity across planet Earth as we move into this new
Mhm.
age. So, this new way of being. So, Z, in the final moments we have left, let's do some final thoughts. What's in your heart? What's on your mind? What do we need to make sure we cover before we wrap up today?
Well, I'm gonna jump in that oscillation mode. I think right now I am thoroughly full with what we've begun here. And we touched on this first principle or this first global vision of everything, everybody is an expression of the divine. And I look forward as we continue from the 10,000-foot level to see how all of this unfolds and works together for the good of one. And then to go a little deeper and think about the next principle. And I'll let you talk a little bit about this next principle because it's a doozy. It if you get that foundation of principles and laws together, man, this next principle is going to create a feeling in you that's going to explode, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. So let's do that, folks. Let's look ahead in the magic time machine into next week. Next week, we're going to be talking about this statement. We see a world in which each and every person lives in alignment with his or her highest spiritual principle, emphasizing unity with God and connection with each other. A world which individually and collectively we are called to a higher state of consciousness and action. Whoo, baby, that's a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
So I know that Z and I have already started our prayer work that we're going to be able to cover that topic in just one episode next week. If not, it might run over into the week after. But honestly, that's what we believe is part of the fun about this. Uh, we're, 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 we believe that we can support you along your journey by expanding and digging into these principles and expanding and digging into the philosophy that is the science of mind, that is religious science, and do it in a way that we trust you're having some fun with us as well. So before we split today, I do want to say please tell a friend to tell a friend and bring a few friends back with you next week. We're going to be here again next Tuesday, Tuesdays at 2 Mountain Time on the New Thought Media Network. We'll be here each and every week. We've got a long way to go to explore all of these various principles. Again, we just finished up number one. There's 10 of these. And we've got some stuff behind that if we need it too. So if you'd like to get your voice heard on this program, if you'd like to share some ideas, insights, or have some suggestions for us, please send an email over to info@ntmedia.org. That's info @ntmedia.org. We'll make sure that we get your thoughts into consideration here.
Yeah, and just real quick on that, Robert, if you have any ideas or comments or anything about what we've discussed today, please send them forward. We this is an interactive program. We learn together, and so if you have some questions or you have a little different viewpoint on something, please send it forward so we can create a foundation that's going to give us the opportunity to create a world that works for everyone.
Right on, exactly. All right, before we go, hey, let's just say a quick shout out and hello, Claire in Australia.
Hey,
Thanks,
hey.
thanks for sharing a comment with us, and Michelle Wadley from New Jersey, Rev Jersey girl. Glad to see you with us as well, dear one. I, I can Oh, I can let the cat out of the bag. I think you might be seeing more of Reverend Michelle around the New Thought Media Network in the future. She's going to be on this show, and I think she's going to be on our Friday show as well coming up here soon. So, uh,
And you know what? I just want to give a quick shout out to Claire over in Australia. Not sure where you are, Claire, but I used to live in Melbourne and Albert Park. So if you're anywhere around there, I miss it so much. Just give you another shout out.
yeah, right on. Okay, folks, that's about all we've got for this week. Again, we'll be back next week, next Tuesday at 2 for more New Thought Today. Until then, peace and blessings.
Peace and blessings.